Blockchain technology and cryptocurrency as it pertains to the tokens associated with each blockchain is often regarded as not having any value. You hear people say that it's rat poison, giant Ponzi schemes. Here is Fat Protocol Thesis, an idea that justifies why value is being captured in the application, no longer in the application layer of blockchains and of the internet, and rather in the protocol layer, the blockchain itself. So you can see right here in our current model of the internet, we have applications hosting most of the value, and the protocol like HTTP or SMTP for emails, they don't control any of the value. While they facilitate the transfer of data or the communication between applications, the applications themselves host all of the value in our current internet model. And that is evidenced by Amazon having such a massive market cap. That's evidenced by Apple having such a massive market cap, or Facebook or Meta. The largest companies in the entire world are all internet based. Adobe, the list goes on, and I'm sure I don't have to list any more companies. That switches with the Fat Thesis protocol. The idea is that blockchain or the protocol is now going to be capturing the value rather than the application capturing the value. I'm not sure it's going to be this dramatic. Personally speaking, I think it's going to be closer to a 50-50 because what we're looking at for value is the data. Who controls the data and who moves and facilitates the data, but also who utilizes the data. So Ethereum itself doesn't necessarily utilize any data. It just controls the data storage and the data communication that takes place. I think it's a very exciting thing, a very exciting time to be alive with it all, because no longer will Apple and Amazon and Meta be controlling and siloing all of your data. Instead, it will be in a protocol that has it open to everyone, kind of facilitating more of a free market. I want to kind of go over it a little bit because it's very interesting. So there's two reasons why in this article they state that the Fat Protocol Thesis has any validity. The first is that there's a shared data layer. So again, the value goes where the data goes. And if the data is being stored on the blockchain, then the shared data layer is going to have the value. The shared data allows for users' data to be held in a central place, namely on the blockchain or the protocol. It's shared equally among the applications built on top of it. Historically, the data was siloed and barriered to entry. Barriers to entry were large. With a shared data center, it's easy for companies to build on top of them to work together. For example, it takes quite a bit of effort to transfer your assets from Robinhood to E-Trade, built on different bases, but it's seamless to do so between Coinbase and Binance. You can even extrapolate that out even further. It's very difficult to move from Amazon Web Services to Google Cloud, right? They both are doing the same thing, that is hosting the front end of your website. They're hosting the data on their services, and that's where a lot of the value of those companies comes from, is hosting the data. So if we can host the data on a blockchain that might be a lot easier if we can nail down interoperability. I know that's a huge debate in the field right now. Are things interoperable? And currently speaking, not really. A lot of the siloing is still happening, but rather than it happening within companies, rather than it happening within applications, it's happening between different protocol layers. And until we kind of consolidate down into a handful of protocols that are good for the space, just like initially on the internet, we had a lot more than just these three protocols. We had a lot more. And they consolidated down into these three, and I'm sure there are still others. I'm not super well versed on that side of everything, but the same thing I imagine is going to happen for blockchain. The second thing is that there are speculative tokens attached that encourages building and speculation on early stage protocols. So there are tokens that represent the value, that represent the data that are being transversed across these blockchains. And these tokens are an easier way for startups to gain funding. It's an easier way to incentivize people to actually use this protocol, is what this article is stating here. And that pertains to a lot of people calling it a Ponzi scheme, because the token goes up in value, so speculators come in and buy up the token so that it continues to go up in value. Developers are incentivized to use this token as the protocol to develop on top of, because it is going up in value, and thus They create applications, which draws in new users, and these new users buy up the token and drive it up in price. It is the main argument for why crypto has no value and why it's just the greater fool theory, where the only way it has value is if someone else comes along later and offers money for it, offers more than what you paid for it. This is indicating that it might be a cycle, a virtuous cycle, rather than a scheme, rather than a Ponzi scheme. It is just a feedback loop, a giant feedback loop where the value goes up, so people are incentivized to develop and build on top of it. By developing and building on top of the protocol, you are incentivizing new people to come use these applications, which then drives the token up even more. Rather than a scheme, it's just how capitalism works. The issues with these theses, and I actually wrote down my own that I'm going to read. But so the applications each are making their own products. Something like Gala Games. Gala Games is built on top of Ethereum, but they have created their own protocol layer that is specific to the gaming niche, because Ethereum can get congested and can be clunky at times. So Gala has created their own token to use in the game system rather than Ethereum. In that scenario, it is very possible that the value gets locked inside of Gala's ecosystem rather than on Ethereum's ecosystem, because Ethereum is just being used to settle the transactions, which segues us perfectly actually into something like Polygon, where Polygon, even though it is there to assist Ethereum in scaling, it is taking a lot of the transaction volume that otherwise would be on Ethereum's network and moving it over to Polygon's network. So Polygon is now, even though it is technically like an application built on top of Ethereum, it is capturing some of the data. It is capturing some of the value. So a couple potential problems with FAT protocol. There's also the idea of interoperability. This is claiming to hopefully get rid of some of the siloing that happens on the protocol level or on the application level, but all it's doing is moving it over to the protocol level. So things are still siloed, and until we can get something like a quant that is very successful at picking and choosing different sections of different protocols to build into one massive application that every company wants to use, until we have that as more of a mainstream narrative, until we have things like, I was going to talk about Near Protocol and their way of bridging over projects from Ethereum onto Near, but I can't remember it. Something like ICP. ICP is interoperable with a vast majority of other blockchains out there. Until we have something like ICP as the main narrative, things are still going to be siloed, which is still somewhat detrimental. That was pretty much my entire thing. That is my take on FAT protocol thesis. I have a write-up that I'm working on right here where I just spewed out a lot of my thoughts, and I'm going to consolidate it down and create somewhat of a newsletter with it just to get it out there. I'm practicing, I am refining my ability to not only write, but to also speak and captivate an audience. So hopefully over time, my skill set improves in both domains. Thank you so much for watching this. Your time's your most valuable asset. Hopefully you found some value in this.